It's the holidays, you're busy, we know. So if you can't make it to a Charles Bookwalter for Congress Town Hall, we'll bring the Town Hall to you. Join Charles Bookwalter Thursday nights at 7 p.m. for a digital Town Hall, streaming live on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Jump into the comments section to join in the conversation. Make a comment or ask Charles for his opinions on the issues that are most important to you. That's the Charles Bookwalter for Congress Digital Town Hall, streaming live beginning at 7 p.m. Thursday nights. Exclusively on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Search Bookwalter for Congress to learn more.
No, we're not going to do it tonight. I'm going to have to do it. I've been out of time. This shirt changed.
Hello, my name's Charles Bookwalter, and I'm running in the 4th Congressional District to represent you. Jim Baird claims that he wants to cut wasteful federal spending, the same claims he made in 2018. Well, he's had 6 years to do that, so let's check out the record. My name's Charles Bookwalter, and I need your vote on May 7th in the primary. Please check out bookwalterforcongress.com. Thank you.
Our nation is at a breaking point. Out of control crime, runaway inflation, political corruption, and politicians who talk a big game but just can't seem to deliver. Charles Bookwalter is a proven conservative leader, a man of faith and conviction, a former Green Beret. Charles Bookwalter offered his life in the service of his nation once before and is now willing to serve again. To learn more about Charles Bookwalter and his vision for the state of Indiana and this great nation, visit bookwalterforcongress.com. That's bookwalterforcongress.com. Donate, volunteer, join in, stand up, and fight back.
If you think of anything, bring it up.
I'm Charles Bookwalter, and I'm running to represent you in Indiana's 4th Congressional District. Why am I running? Simple. The out-of-control spending, well, it's out of control, and somebody has to do something about it. Take, for example, this taxpayer-funded billboard that was strategically placed by Representative Baird in front of my Frankfort, Indiana, Jimmy John's franchise. Nice one, Jim. Now, to the untrained eye, this billboard looks exactly like a campaign ad, but it's not. It's franked mail. It's your tax dollars being used by an incumbent to remind you of all the reasons that you should go vote for them. And every day I leave work, I'm reminded exactly why I'm running for Congress. Jim Baird won't let me forget. Thanks, Jim.
I'm Charles Bookwalter, and I approve this message.
It's the holidays, you're busy, we know. So if you can't make it to a Charles Bookwalter for Congress Town Hall, we'll bring the Town Hall to you. Join Charles Bookwalter Thursday nights at 7 p.m. for a digital Town Hall, streaming live on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Jump into the comments section to join in the conversation. Make a comment or ask Charles for his opinions on the issues that are most important to you. That's the Charles Bookwalter for Congress Digital Town Hall, streaming live beginning at 7 p.m. Thursday nights. Exclusively on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Search Bookwalter for Congress to learn more. Our nation is at a breaking point. Out of control crime, runaway inflation, political corruption, and politicians who talk a big game but just can't seem to deliver. Charles Bookwalter is a proven conservative leader, a man of faith and conviction, a former Green Beret. Charles Bookwalter offered his life in the service of his nation once before and is now willing to serve again. To learn more about Charles Bookwalter and his vision for the state of Indiana and this great nation, visit bookwalterforcongress.com. That's bookwalterforcongress.com. Donate, volunteer, join in, stand up, and fight back.
Hey everybody! I don't see Kramer. It looks like he's black, but I think
There
we're
we
live
go.
here.
I was taking a second just to make sure that we were right, so we're right on here. Welcome to the show. My name is Kramer. This is Charles Bookwalter. He's running for Congress in Indiana's 4th District. It is the Bookwalter for Congress Town Hall. We take donations. You can do that at bookwalterforcongress.com. Go do that now. Get that out of the way so it's not bothering you throughout the entire program. But tonight, the reason we do this, it's a digital town hall to talk to you, the constituents of the Indiana's 4th District. We'll also talk to people around the nation. So if you want to join in and give your comments about what you think is going on in the nation, we'd love to hear that as well. But I think it's interesting that, Charles, since last week, let's look at what's happened. In just the last few days, the Kansas City shooting, we've got the idiots at the National Archives that poured stuff all over the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and all of that. You've got Fonnie Willis down in Georgia. We've got the border going on. And then Wall Street tanked last Friday because Wall Street realized they're not going to get the money they thought they were going to get from the Fed when they lowered rates because the economy was doing so good. And the report says, no, the economy's not doing what Congress, or not what Congress, but what the Biden administration says it's doing. And it lost 500 points on Friday. I didn't see it today, but I imagine there wasn't much change. So welcome to the show. We got a lot to talk about.
Yeah. It's a house of cards. It's something we've been talking about for a long time. When I was on the phone all day today talking to people in the 4th Congressional District. And one thing that I say to them, and when I'm out door knocking, when I introduce myself, I say, I think that we've lost control of our government. We've completely lost control. And I've never heard one person object to that statement. They usually agree. They say, yeah, I agree with you. Now it's a matter of just figuring out what issues are important to you and where do you think that we've lost control. But we have completely lost control of our government. And I often when I say things, we talk about economics, talk about how these statistics that we say come out are not good. They do not look good. These indicators don't look good. I point to people to websites like shadowstats.com. Shadowstats compiles data based on indicators and definitions that we used like 2 decades ago. So as you know, the government changes definitions. They change the way that we measure things. And then they say, or they remove things from the bucket and they change it. And then they say, look, these indicators show great things. Well, shadowstats.com shows what actually, based on the way we used to measure things, inflation is 22%. And these indicators don't look good. Unemployment is really high because people aren't even looking for jobs anymore. So I direct people to this a lot. And, the establishment points at me and laughs like shadowstats.com. That's crazy. You shouldn't look at that. But in reality, once again, we're constantly vindicated that the narrative that is told by the mainstream media and by, the managerial class, they're wrong. They're completely wrong. And do you know how we know this, Kramer, and they don't? Is because we actually are listening and we're living among. Right. We are actually normal human beings that don't have that don't use government credit cards and don't have large bank accounts that are funded by lobbyists and PACs. We actually feel the effects of their terrible policies that they force on Americans.
Well, I think it's interesting when you look at the price of gas, for example, and when it goes up, in my head, I do it automatically. If I go and the last time that I filled up gas, let's say it was $1 a gallon. That's a long time ago, but just for easy math here, it's $1 a gallon. Well, if I've got a 17-gallon tank, right, which I do in my car, well, that's going to cost me $17. If they raise it by a dime, it's now $18.70, right? They raise it by 40 cents, 50 cents. Think about what we've gone through in the last few years in this nation to where these prices have gone up time and time again. I heard something interesting today. It's a different way of looking at how we're being robbed blind. If you have $100 in the bank and you're saving that for a future day, and the government goes and prints trillions of dollars, it devalues your $100 in the bank to the point where you no longer have any value. And the question was asked today, where do we store our money to ensure that it doesn't get eaten up through inflation?
Well, I can tell you.
Go ahead.
Gold and silver.
Gold and silver is what you should be stacking. Gold and silver. Anyone that pays attention to this, it's a hard asset. It's a hard currency that protects your wealth. I've been an advocate of gold and silver. I bought my first few silver rounds in 2012 when I was stationed out in at Fort Lewis, Washington, and I encourage people to do that. If I've talked about this a lot, but if you remember in the Constitution, it's written that the federal government would only be able to transact in specie payment, SPECIE. That's hard assets. And, it's been a constant fight in the United States is not committing to a central bank policy. The first Bank of America that Thomas Jefferson scuttled and crashed was the first attempt at central banking. The second Bank of America that Andrew Jackson scuttled and crashed was the second attempt at central banking. They finally got it through with the Federal Reserve Act in 1913, and ever since then, and then the decoupling of the dollar from gold was the death knell for our currency, where a dollar now is worth 1 cent. It's like lost 98% of its value.
Well, I think it's important, Charles, let me jump in. I think it's important to note that companies raising their prices does not raise inflation. The market messes with that, right? If Tide starts charging $13, which they do, by the way, for their bottle of detergent, and you decide that you're not going to pay $13 anymore, and you want to go to a $9 version of that product, you can do that. You walk with your feet, and Tide they'll accommodate. Eventually, hey, we're losing market share. Why are we doing it? Well, our prices are too high. Inflation comes when the government prints money. When it counterfeits money, it counterfeits our cash and spends it for their purposes and then puts it back on us to pay it back. That's what happens.
Inflation is a policy.
It is.
And it is a policy that can be reversed.
Yep.
One of the greatest economists in the 20th century, Ludwig von Mises, wrote about this. The Austrian school has written about this. Inflation is a policy. It's a policy that's caught up in the Keynesian school of economic theory, where they say that deficit spending is actually good for an economy. And by the end, most people don't realize, but by the end of his career, Keynes opposed his theory. He realized that if you run this ball out long enough, that this isn't sustainable. So he didn't even subscribe to his theory by the end of his career. But inflation is a policy. So look, I saw Congressman Jim Baird made a tweet the other day, and he was railing against inflation. Well, Congressman Baird in his career has added $8.5 trillion to the federal deficit. And he literally in a tweet said that inflation is a result of illegal immigrants coming into the United States. That makes no economic sense whatsoever. It clearly shows that Congressman Baird has never opened a basic economics book to understand that inflation is a result. It's a policy, and it can be reversed through tightening of the money supply and through stop trying to manipulate the interest rates to get at some ridiculous level at 2%. And let me ask this, Kramer. Whoever has been opposed to gas going down? Who's ever been opposed to grocery prices going down?
Federal governments. The governments that tax those things. They don't want the prices to come down. They want inflation to stay high because the way that they make their money is attached percentage-wise to all the products that we buy, the products that we use.
Yeah. Where we see it as a good thing when prices go down, but the economists tell us, oh, this is deflation. This is terrible. Here's another way of looking at how pernicious it is and inflation really is. So the income tax, the 16th Amendment, the details, I don't have all of them, but essentially the income tax only affected about 1% of the people, and it taxed people, high income earners that earned over $100,000 or something. Let's just call it $100,000. Okay. Well, that was in 1916, I think, around that time frame. Yep. Okay. Who makes $100,000 now?
Almost everybody.
Almost everybody, right? So when they put those numbers in effect back then, the pernicious idea of inflation, it wraps up everybody into these tax brackets when they pass it 100 years ago. And I think they know this, knowing that 100 years from now, all of you are going to be in that tax bracket and all of you are going to have to pay income taxes. So like right now in like, let's say a death tax or inheritance tax, when they say people earning or have a net worth of over 500,000 have to give this huge exorbitant amount to the government, right? Because that's fair. Well, today that may seem like a lot, but in 50 years, everyone, because of inflation, is going to fall into that, and they're going to take a chunk of everyone.
Right. And by the way, when we say the majority of people are making $100,000, we're rounding up, right? We know that people don't make, the average doesn't make $100,000, but when you look at the tax base, those Americans that pay the most into tax, it's 100,000 is an average range for this tax. The other thing that I think is interesting, Charles, is that for the first time in I don't know how long, 25, 30 years, I'm getting a tax rebate back from the federal government this year. Do you know why? Because the economy is so sucky, that business is so bad. I've actually got a loss for the first time in 30 years of doing business. That's what Bidenomics have done. I'm getting a tax rebate back because I paid too much into the system. They owe me money back because of the economy.
Those are real stats. That's what they can tell. They can act like, every president acts like it's the greatest economy ever. Well, if it was, and this is a problem I had with Donald Trump when he first ran, is Trump ran on, and he ran knowing that you can't just print off all this money. He ran on that in 2016, but then when he took over the economy, he said it's all great. Gosh, I can't. I was going to talk about inflation, and I just thought about something else.
Let's jump in here. Let's take a break real quick, and then when we come back, let's jump into the John Rust story, what happened today in the Indiana Supreme Court, and then let's talk about Jim Baird's new mailer. I think it's interesting. We want to get into it and explain some of the things that he says in his new mailer using your tax dollars. We'll do that right after this.
Our nation is at a breaking point. Out of control crime, runaway inflation, political corruption, and politicians who talk a big game but just can't seem to deliver. Charles Bookwalter is a proven conservative leader, a man of faith and conviction, a former Green Beret. Charles Bookwalter offered his life in the service of his nation once before and is now willing to serve again. To learn more about Charles Bookwalter and his vision for the state of Indiana and this great nation, visit bookwalterforcongress.com. That's bookwalterforcongress.com. Donate, volunteer, join in, stand up, and fight back.
Welcome back to the show. My name is Kramer. With me is Charles Bookwalter. Charles is running for Congress in Indiana's 4th District. I think it's interesting, Charles, that while we were gone on break, by the way, Pat Carlina on Facebook asked, is there any way that we can get our money back to being based on gold and silver? Do you have a plan for that or something that you're interested in addressing?
Well, yeah, I mean, it would take an act of Congress. We need to look. I'm all about auditing the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is responsible for this fiat currency. The Federal Reserve is printing all this money. It's a private bank, everyone. It's not a government, although they're appointed by government officials. They're responsible for this mess they're in. None of this would be possible. The wars would not be possible if it weren't for the Federal Reserve printing off all this money. In fact, the reason that our founding fathers did not want to have a bank like this was because of war. They wanted the elected representatives, if they wanted to go to war or do any big government programs, they would have to go directly to the people and ask them for the money to do so. The Federal Reserve is very dangerous. It's what leads to every single time we've had this kind of fiat currency. It's always resulted in the crash of that currency, and it either needs to be audited or completely gotten rid of. And if we're going to print currency like that, the Treasury should actually be responsible for this. The Treasury shouldn't be relying on the Federal Reserve, a private bank owned by very few banking elites, and it needs to be audited and really scrutinized heavily by Congress.
I go even further than that. The audit doesn't matter. We already know they're broke. They would not be printing counterfeit money That's what the stimulus is. It's counterfeit money. If you or I had a printing press and did the exact same thing, we would go to jail. We'd be locked up. Be locked up. They print it. They call it quantitative easing. They say, hey, we're going to put some stimulus in. That's fake money, folks. It's counterfeit. It doesn't have anything backing it. It's all fake. And so it's important to...
Hey, by the way, sorry, that's what I was going to say earlier, is that is the policy that we've had. When in 2008, when we had the crash, the Federal Reserve stepped in and they said, we have to do quantitative easing to save this market. Remember, George Bush said this, I think it was Bush that said this, that said, we have to do this policy to save America. And then we bounced back from 2008 and in 2010, but quantitative easing never stopped. And in 2016, when Trump took over, he ran on an opposite policy. He said that it was rigged and the Federal Reserve. And then he got into office and they started with QE 3 and 4. And I remember telling my financial advisor, how is it that quantitative easing is absolutely necessary to get us out of a problem, but when we're in the so-called greatest economy that we've ever been in, we still need quantitative easing? The reason is because once you start QE, you go QE infinity. And my assessment is, in the last few years, this increased in interest rates, which aren't even that high in reality. They hurt people that don't have very much money. But in reality, interest rates aren't that high. This was just a little bit of a bump that they were doing, so they could then reduce them again, which they'll probably do at the next in the next bank meetings, and so they can make money easy again, so people can borrow money at a discounted rate, which is a misappropriation of funds, which makes people do things that they shouldn't do, borrow money that they shouldn't borrow, invest in things that aren't good ideas. Whereas if they had like an 8% interest rate to pay, they would rethink about doing some of these. It's called a misappropriation of money and funds.
Well, and a great example is they take our dollars, regardless of what they're doing. They take our dollars and give it to somebody else who never paid taxes, is not an American citizen. That's taxation without representation. We're getting taxed to send our money overseas elsewhere, and that's not in the Constitution. There's no authority in the Constitution to be able to do that. Foreign aid is something made up by congressmen to be able to funnel money to another nation so they can funnel back to themselves. So we found it time and time again. Amanda Mitchell is on Facebook, and she has a question for you. What are your thoughts on the Hexagon Group's 2,500 acres of solar park going in? I assume that it's on the southwest quadrant of the district, correct?
Yeah, it's in boot camp. Hexagon is looking all over. I know that in Illinois, Hexagon Group came in. I think it was Hexagon Group, and they negotiated in Illinois a 5,000 parcel piece of land, and the project has not yet even gotten started, and they're already asking for 9,000 more. For Amanda, and to make it quick, Amanda, the green energy New Deal is a scam. And these solar projects have to be stopped immediately. They are stealing and robbing our land. We need to deregulate coal and oil. For 100 years, we've taken taxpayer dollars and invested in the infrastructure to provide us reliable, powerful, good energy to heat our homes, cool our homes, get irrigation to our crops, increase our yields. And the federal government has come in and has regulated that to the point that we are closing coal factories, and we have an energy crisis. And they are now taking our money to invest it in a failed system that cannot provide the amount of energy that we need, that is sustainable, reliable, and on demand, that is going to help us. And I think it is part of a bigger plan to control the production of food, to control energy, to enslave the American people. And I am absolutely and adamantly opposed. I go to these commissioner meetings. I speak out about this. None of these companies would be able to do this if it weren't for taxpayer dollars. And we have to fight back against this scam. Now, say one more thing. When people said, how can we invest and protect our money? Well, I also encourage you to buy guns and ammo. And one of the reasons is because all the issues that we're dealing with right now, and I am not being hyperbolic, I think that you need to stack bullets. You need to stack guns. We're about to talk about issues that actually lead to people revolting against their own government.
Yep.
And the John Russ case is an example of that. This Frank male privileges are an example of that. People are upset. We're mad. And solar panels is an example of that. As these managers, they're not even representatives.
Nope.
They're not representatives. They're managers are mismanaging our agriculture. They're mismanaging our economy. They're mismanaging our military. They're mismanaging our healthcare. They're mismanaging everything. So you need to buy gold and silver. You need to buy a little homestead. You need to stack as many rifles as you can. You need to buy ammo, and you need to start learning how to train and defend yourself, your property, and your family, and your liberties.
Well, Charles, what's interesting is that you make the statement that it's not hyperbolic, that you're not just saying it to say it, right? I've seen your homestead. You're not, right? You believe this with all your heart. And what's interesting is I don't have a homestead. I wish I did. Because I'm about 10 years behind you. I wish that I had thought the same thing 10 years ago. I thought things were going to go on as they've always gone. And the survivalist and the homesteaders, they all look crazy until now when they've got their chickens, they've got their cows. I mean, think about this. The federal government and all of the advocates for global warming are telling you that we have to stop our entire economy and get it down so that, well, we can stop, cow farts and stop this ridiculous ideology that they have, that we have to enact this, otherwise the planet's going to die. At the same exact time, they're telling us that, hey, it's okay to use as many planes and use as many tanks and use as many bombs as you want to go destroy other human beings, kill them. Isn't that what the global warming thing is all about? To save human lives? And at the same time, they're advocating for killing human lives.
Yeah. And they tell us you're going to be safer if you give us all your money and put us in charge. Your cost of living is going to be less. Your food is going to be less expensive. You're going to be healthier. You're going to be freer. You're going to work less. You're going to have more money. All these are lies. We work harder than we ever have. Our money does not go as far. We're less free. Our food and supply chains are in jeopardy. We are on the brink of war because of this managerial class. And yes, I have been living this. I saw this a long time ago. We purchased our homestead in 2014 and started prepping and homesteading back then. And there's a reason I bought this particular piece of property. It sits out high on a hill. It has running water on it. I have a field and acreage where I raise animals and raise and grow hay and do all those things. And when COVID happened, many people who thought I was kind of one of these crazy, wild conspiracy guys that was a prepper were calling me saying, hey, one, I'm thinking about getting some chickens. Two, I need to get a firearm. I'm thinking about doing this. How do you start? Where do we start prepping? And I started fielding calls every day. I would have a friend call me. So I encourage people, and you got to get out of the city. You need to leave the city, get out of the city. And that's another problem with all this Green New Deal and all this central planning that the Indiana state government is doing is they're trying to expand the size of the city. They want to export Indianapolis, which is a failed, crime-ridden city that no one wants to live in. And they want to take over our rural communities and expand these cities and think and gaslight us.
Well, a great example, Charles, a great example is that the Biden administration wants to know, and they just released a report. They just said that they wanted to know where your gardens, if you had a home garden at home, because their statement is that your home garden has a bigger carbon footprint than buying food from the grocery store. Talk about being gaslit. You mean I can get in my car and I can drive to the grocery store and I can get a cucumber and bring it back home, and that's less of a carbon footprint than going out to my garden, picking it and taking it back inside, washing it and eating it? Explain that to me. I'm too stupid to understand that. That's what they think. They think we're stupid. They think that we won't understand the complexity of it. And I'll add this. We were talking about this earlier today. The more I get upset, the more passionate I get about this, is to get things down to the brass tacks. And the brass tacks are this. the Democrats on a regular basis will go to the podium and say, well, all of Trump supporters or all of MAGA or all of Republicans, they're uneducated. They don't have college degrees like us. We've got wars in Ukraine. We've got wars going on in Israel. We've got France is on fire. Germany's on fire. South Africa's on fire. South America's on fire. The entire world is imploding around us. And who do we have to blame for that? Is it the non-educated people? Is the college dropouts like me? Is it us? No. It's the smartest people on the face of the planet.
The managers, the intellectuals that promise us that with just a little bit more power, with just a few more laws, with just a little bit of increase year over year in your taxes, that they're going to take care of it, that they're going to figure out this plan, that they're smarter than you, they're smarter than us, and they've got this all under control. It's a complete scam, and people are waking up to it, and people are waking up to it, and people see this and they know. And I encourage people, and what's healthier? It's cucumber that they're growing in a lab somewhere, or a cucumber you're growing out in your own soil. Right. What's better for your children? A cucumber that you show them how to drive to the store, or a cucumber that you start from a seed and you show them how this works and how plants grow and how you nurture it, and the value of production and the reward that you get when you produce your own food, and then when you store your own food and can your own food. And then you rely on your own food. Like, what's more valuable?
What you realize is that you don't have to rely on the government for anything, and that's what they hate most. The moment that you're self-reliant, that's what they hate. They need your dependence on them to have power and control over you. The moment that that's why our founding fathers were so willing to rise up to the British government, because they did everything on their own. They baked their own bread. They caught their own food. They didn't go to grocery stores. There were no such things.
Yep.
You did everything yourself.
That's right. You better rise up, America. You better rise up, Indiana. Yep. It is time. We are absolutely at that point. And let's roll into the John Russ case, because this is a perfect example, because I don't even want to talk. It just happened. And I really want to get to this franked mail thing. But they just ruled. Kramer, you and I were both at this Indiana Supreme Court this past Monday to hear the John Russ case. Most people know I was a part of this 2 primary rule, fighting it. I got kicked off the ballot in 2022, not because I wasn't a Republican, but merely because of the letter of the law. And remember your biblical training.
Before you say that, let's exactly say what that is. The letter of the law says that in Indiana, they've passed a law that says that you cannot run as a Republican or a Democrat if you haven't voted in 2 primaries in that party. Correct?
Right.
And so the full term, if you decide to run for office, you move to Indiana and you're upset about how things are going, it would take you 6 years to be eligible to run for office. Now, 4 years to be eligible, but another 2 years to get elected to any office in the state of Indiana because of the way the elections work. So a 6-year period, you have no voice, you have no say-so other than that as a citizen. And that's not what our founding fathers would intend. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And what do they always say when you air your grievances? Well, if you're so mad, why don't you do something about it? Well, 81% of Hoosiers haven't even voted in a primary. So when something happens, let's just say that our National Health Agency decides to do a gain of research functioning on a virus, and they turn it into a bioweapon, and then they release that bioweapon on the United States and the whole world, and people die, and they create a vaccine, and they force it on people, and they completely disrupt our way of life, and they lock us down, and they hurt our communities, and they print off money, and it leads to massive and rampant hyperinflation. Let's just say that happens. Okay, hypothetical. Well, if that concerns you and it completely turns your life upside down, and you completely agree with it, you can't do anything about it for 6 years. In Indiana, they just imposed or overturned, because a judge turned it over. They overturned a ruling that makes Indiana the strictest in the entire nation to get ballot access if you have not voted in 2 primaries. Now, the Supreme Court only held up the maximum length was 12 months. They said it's okay to prove for the for the respect for the party to have to prove that you're a Republican in some 12-month time frame, whatever that looks at, either registering as a Republican or voting in a primary, something like that. Indiana just decided, the Supreme Court of Indiana just decided, nope, 4 years is good in Indiana. And like you said, 6 years to make an impact. It should incense Hoosiers and Americans for that matter, because this is precedent now. Now other states can do this. This very difficult need to overcome this to vote in elections. So Hoosier, and this isn't a matter of when in Indiana, people don't vote in the primary. There's massive disenfranchisement. People want to act like there's voting, like, oh, well, you can't have an ID because people aren't gonna vote. Well, you have to vote in 2 primaries now. Like they don't care about voter turnout. They clearly don't care.
Well, it's a mandate. It's a mandate to participate before you can participate. Right? They're mandating you act in the system before you freely decide to act in the system. And that you've got to plan out your political career at least 4 years in advance, 6 years in advance. That, hey, I'm going to run for senator after that guy I'm going to vote in 2 primaries. I'm going to run for his office in 6 years. That's exactly what they're saying. You've got to wait 6 years to be able to run. We got a question here about, talk about what the constituents in the district are telling you. As you go door to door, you've been doing a lot of door knocking here lately. What are the constituents of the 4th District telling you? What are their concerns?
The border is a major concern for people in the district. Inflation, border and inflation. That's what I hear. Most places I go, they can't pay their bill. Everyone feels it. Everyone feels it everywhere they go. Prices are high. And people are incensed of what's going on in the border. And I guess the last thing I'll say is people have no faith in their elected representatives. They do not trust they know these people are corrupt. They know they're being paid by lobbyists and PACs. They just don't know what they can do about it. They don't know. They think they don't have any power. Or they're too busy. And in fact, it reminds me, it's a perfect time to say this. And I can talk more about what people are saying in the 4th District, but those are some of the biggest issues. When I was thinking about this Rust case, it just really got me fired up. I got so angry about the Supreme Court doing this. It reminded me of a quote by G.K. Chesterton. I want to read this quote. G.K. Chesterton was a well-known, one of the greatest Christian authors in history, and there's a line that I know from him, so I looked up that line. I wanted to get the quote right, but I found the paragraph of the quote, and I thought this is so pertinent. It's perfect for this scenario right here. That question asked me about people not having the time to do it. They're working so hard to take care of their families, serve their churches and communities, pay their bills and their taxes, 55 cents on a dollar. So this is taken from an interview given to the Cleveland Press during a 1921 trip to the United States. G.K. Chesterton said, quote, "The men whom the people ought to choose to represent them are too busy to take the jobs, but the politician is waiting for it."
Yep.
He's the pestilence of modern time. What we should try to do is make politics as local as possible. Keep the politicians near enough to kick them,
right.
He said. The villagers who met under the village tree could also hang their politicians to the tree. And his last sentence is a famous sentence that I've found. It is terrible to contemplate how few politicians are hanged. That is G.K. Chesterton's quote. I'm just
well, that's Charles, that's the whole language, right? This is this thing of language, and people go, oh my God, that is so vitriolic, that is so violent. Why are you calling for violence, Charles? Why would you do that? I'm not. I'm saying that unless we get there, unless we take these steps to stop these men from doing the evil that they're doing, that's where we're going. Talk for a moment about one of the things that came up here recently was a comment that you made a couple of weeks ago where you said that you're a potential of great violence, right? That you have the potential of great violence. I think that people take that wrong. That you don't want violence, but as a Green Beret who's been deployed several times around the planet, you know violence all too well. And that's the last thing you want on your doorstep, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. It's destructive. Look, I think so many of these refugees are coming here because there's war in the Middle East. They've been bombed for the last 50 years. They don't have fuel. They don't have food. Afghanistan was like a primitive area. That's what violence leads to. Violence is not productive. Violence causes problems in your personal life. If you've got a man that can't control his anger in your home, that's miserable to live around. It's not what the Bible says, that we should be slow to anger, that we need to give grace and mercy. There's a reason I don't spank my children, because that's a form of violence. I don't want my children to see an angry man hitting a young, small girl. I don't do that. But the fact is, it's just like, I know that there's a spiritual war going on in the world, that there's evil and good. Well, you can't know good, or you can't know the definition of good, if you don't have evil. Well, the same holds true with peace and violence. People don't know what peace is if you're not capable of great amounts of violence. That's why I'm so capable of controlling it and understand and presenting peace and grace and mercy, because I've seen violence. I've perpetrated violence and war. And so because of that reason, in my mind, I always take my place to diplomacy, grace, mercy, humility, because when provoked, then what you will feel is a wrath,
right,
that's very difficult to control. And that's what we're advocating. That's why we're telling these managers to back off,
right,
back off, get out of our lives, leave us alone. We are giving you grace and mercy, and we are being peaceful right now.
right.
But if you push us much farther, we are going to have some major problems. And I am not advocating for violence. I'm literally advocating for peace right now.
Yep.
But peace comes with a warning to you, managers and elected officials. You need to back off. And those of you that aren't engaged in the battle right now, you men that are capable of great violence but walk around peaceful men, need to join this fight in every state, in every community. Join campaigns like mine, so that we can have a unified front to show them that you are looking at peaceful men that are capable of great violence, and you better back off.
Well, the reason I bring that up is because I think that people should understand, right, that when we talk about violence, it's as a warning. It's not a threat. It's a warning, right? Quit doing this, or this is going to happen. Stop doing this to the American people, or this could happen. Stop doing this, or this is the price you're going to pay. And we always talk about fighting the battle, but that's all that's hyperbole around elections and politics. That's what they're getting Trump on right now, right? He says, hey, we have to go fight for our rights. And they're saying, well, he called for violence. That isn't calling for violence. Fighting for your rights is not a call for violence. But I will say this, Charles, and I think it's important for people to understand. The only thing that the government has at their disposal to make you do what they want you to do, especially when you don't want to do it, is either violence or the threat of violence. I'll lock you up. We'll put you in jail. We'll take away your home. We'll take away your property. We'll seize this. That's what government does. So when I return the favor, I don't see it as violence. When I do the exact same language back to them, they should fear the American people more than we should fear them. And currently, I went to Texas recently. I went to the border. And what I think is interesting is people said, don't go. It's a trap. I refuse to live in a country where the government uses my rights of free travel, speech, and so on against me. If I'm afraid of that, then, Charles, I don't have rights. I have permissions. I'm not free.
You're not free. And that's what J6 was all about. Yeah. They want us to be scared so that we won't protest. And then, if anything, J6 was an example of how you protest. Not one person had a gun. It was not that long ago when Gorsuch, or one of these guys, was being voted on the Supreme Court, when the liberals went into the Supreme Court, were banging on the doors and creating all kinds of disturbances and violence, and nothing happened. But when they are scared, when patriots get together,
Right.
even when we don't have guns.
Yep.
And so they create this theater. And if you remember, they hired an ABC or an NBC producer, an executive producer, to produce the January 6th congressional hearings. It was show. It was a theater.
Yep.
They were trying to create a narrative, and many people fell for it, of something that wasn't the case. And in reality, J6 was an example of how to protest peacefully, particularly among conservative patriot men that are getting together and exercising their right to protest. It was an example that they didn't burn anything down.
Right.
They didn't kill anyone. In fact, one of us was killed. We just came off of a summer of massive violence and destruction that cost billions of dollars, and then they call us violent. It's a scam, man. It's a scam.
Well, Charles, let's take another break here. When we come back, let's talk about this new flyer that Jim Baird put out. If you haven't seen this in your mailbox, you might want to go take a look at it because, well, it's full of lies and untruths and so on, and we'll discuss that here in just a moment. Who is Charles Bookwalter? Charles is a husband, father, entrepreneur, and former Green Beret. But most importantly, Charles Bookwalter is a constitutional conservative. Charles Bookwalter will work to close our borders, ensuring the safety and security of our nation. Charles will fight to secure your personal medical freedoms, giving you complete control over your own healthcare decisions. And Charles Bookwalter will continue his fight to secure our elections, ensuring every vote counts. On May 7th, you have a choice.
I'm Charles Bookwalter, and I approve this message.
Okay, it's been an interesting few weeks. With all the mailings coming from Congressman Baird, one of the interesting things about politics is that, and computers, is that we have access to all the money that he's spending. We know what he has in his bank account. We know what he has in his campaign bank account. And he's not spending any of that money, folks. He's spending yours through it's called franked mail. It's a privilege given to Congress. It allows them to converse, to talk, to communicate with their constituents, and Jim's doing it to great avail. And what he's showing that, well, he's scared is what I believe. But more importantly, how much money did it take to print this, send it out to everybody at 50 cents a piece? Everybody in the 4th District got one. Here you go. I saved you $300,000. Now, I think what's interesting in that, he's claiming to have saved us $4.3 million. What's the carbon sequestration bill that he's authored? How much money is in that bill?
That one, I believe, it's 31 million. It's not as much as it could be.
No. The entire project is $2.5 billion.
Oh, okay.
The entire program is $2.5 billion.
Yeah, that's
500,000. It's $500 million a year for a 5-year period. That's $2.5 billion. Research grants, colleges, and so on. So let's get into this, if you don't mind. First of all, let me put this one up here. I'm going to come over here and do this. We'll go over here, and then we'll bring this up here. This is the flyer that came out. This is the one we're talking about right here. Jump into this, Charles. You know a lot more about this information. And let's go to the other side of it real quick than I do.
Yes. So first of all, what I want to say is all these flyers are coming out in direct response to our critiques about Jim Baird's record and him being a spender. So these are campaign pieces, which is unethical and illegal, actually, based on the Congress ethics about using the frank mail privilege. But if this one right here, you can see on the left-hand side, right there, you can see that he's saying that he's returning all this money to Hoosiers and that he is the lowest spender. All he's saying is that he was the lowest spender when it comes to the constituent services program. So Jim Baird.
Well, let's explain that. Let's explain what the constituent services program is, because that's important to understand.
That's doing your job. The constituent services program is what a congressman is supposed to do. That's why you're elected every 2 years. You're supposed to be in your community, dealing with issues in the 4th, serving the community with whatever government programs in that community are available to those people. And so what Jim Baird is saying is that paltry figure, that $4.4 million that was returned, means that he was not doing a lot of constituent services. And that is true because in 2020, because of the two primary rule, he did not have a primary opponent, so he was not primaried. And in 2020, so they were the two primary. I'm sorry. In 2020, he was his primary challenger was removed from the ballot for the one primary rule, and in 2022, his primary challenger, Charles Bookwalter, was removed from the ballot from the two primary rule. So Jim Baird did not have to be in his district working and getting to know and dealing with the issues of the constituents in the 4th district. So when it say he's the the least spender, it just means that he wasn't doing things in his district. That's all he means. And that money, $4.4 million, was not returned to taxpayers.
No.
It was returned to the Frank Mail budget that was redistributed among the other representatives. So that's misleading. It's lawyer speak, and it's in direct. It's a direct response to our accusations that he is a big government spender of money.
Well, and it goes back to, again, that Jim Baird is not who he says he is. It's not who he said. He's being dishonest. He could have just said, hey, this piece was produced with all the dollars he has available to him to showcase to people who earn $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year to think to themselves, or less, to think to themselves, oh my God, he gave almost $5 million or $4.5 million back to the people of Indiana. Never happened.
No,
and
that did not happen.
It's misleading, and this is what we hate in politics.
Yeah.
Not only did he tell you, not only did he mislead you, but he spent your money to do it.
Yeah.
It's gross.
He spent that money with your taxpayer dollars to answer a response that we critiqued him about, to tell you to make up this number and being the lowest spender of your taxpayer dollars in the district. I don't know where I'll fall when I win the primary, but I will use the Frank Mail privilege to inform the voters of why I'm doing things.
Well,
this is
a great way to do that, Charles, is to say, hey, listen, I'm going to be back in town, in the district on this date. Please join me for a town hall.
Right.
I want to hear from you. Jim
Yes.
Baird's never done that. When Jim Baird comes back to Indiana, it's to talk to the big money people in here. He goes to the political hacks. They all get together, pat each other on the back, and say what a great job everybody's doing. And then they head back. They don't talk to you and me.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about that real quick.
Yeah.
By the way, since
I
we're
would
here-
spend the
Well, go ahead and talk about that.
I would spend the money to inform voters of why I voted a particular way. Like people, I have to explain people why I'm against sending more and more money to Ukraine. Well, I'm going to have to explain my votes. That's what I would use the Frank Mail privilege for, to say, hey, this is why we're voting this way in Congress. This is why, here's a vote that's coming up. What do you think? What are your opinions about sending more money to Ukraine? That's how it's meant to be used, but that's not how it's being used.
Yeah, let me bring up this next flyer. I don't think I have it sized right. Let me pull that back. I got something screwed up here. Yeah, let's take a look at this real quick here. Let me pull that out. That's the one that's wrong. This is the second flyer that we've gotten, and this is what's interesting to me. By the way, I did want to get into these numbers, Charles, because I think it's interesting. He's got a staff, and the staff's hours. He started opening up these locations around the district to where you could drop in and talk to his team or talk to somebody from his group for 2 hours at certain positions, certain locations throughout the district. And that just happened recently because they've only done 51 hours of mobile office hours conducted in a 6-year period. 51 hours in the district. That's not even a full work week. Not the work week I have. I work 50 to 80 hours a week.
Maybe that's a 6 hour. Maybe that's a 6-year work week for a congressman.
That may be it. The Joe Biden plan. Let's go to this next flyer. This is the one that we really wanted to get into, primarily because of what they're trying to convince us of is that Jim Baird is a conservative. Jim Baird's fighting for you. Now, these are all words that they use. And by the way, in fairness, I worked on the Jim Baird campaign to get him into office for Congress back in 2018. So full disclosure, the team that is currently working for Jim Baird right now is the team that I worked with. I know what they do. I know how they work. And this is the trash that they put out. This is why I had a problem with the entire process, and I'm no longer there. Because I said, this is wrong. When Charles and I met and we started talking about these things, discussing these issues, it was important that I get behind a candidate that is against the same things that I'm against. And this is one of the issues. He says one thing and does another. Let me.
That's why it's great to have you on the team, Kramer. First of all, let me point out something about just this quote. Okay, this is a philosophical difference between Congressman Baird and myself. If you look at the last line on that quote, it says, Hoosiers do better when the government gets out of their way and gives them the tools they need to thrive. Government is not there to provide you tools to thrive. That is not the role of government. Government's role is to protect you from your God-given rights to life, liberty, and property. The philosophical difference is that Congressman Baird and all those other congressmen out there want to perfectly tailor government to give you handouts or a baby. And in reality, people, we don't get them. You and I don't get them. Big business gets them. Big pharma gets them. Big military gets them. Big food, big ag. The tools are given to them to thrive. They're not given to us. So it is a philosophical difference between Congressman Baird and myself. I want the government out of your way and give you more money back so that you can thrive as a natural, God-fearing, God-loving Hoosier patriot that has freedom and prosperity based on your hard work and your ethics and whatnot. Let's flip that over and go to the other one.
So on this portion right here, basically there are 7 points. Well, they're not basically. There's actually 7 points. There are 7 points on here, the myths that he's trying to dispel. Now, what you may or may not know is that Jim Baird put a poll into the 4th District just prior to the caucuses in Iowa. And on there, by the way, I want to point this out. In the polls, he asked the question, what's your position on Trump? Before endorsing Trump, he asked for your position. He wanted to find out what your favorability of Trump in the district was before he endorsed him. Think about that. Then when we go through this, what you'll also find the information of how he's spinning information, and they're wanting you to believe things that are not true.
Yeah, and another thing, Kramer, is that all of these, every single issue, these 8 myths, or I think it's 8 myths, these myths are everything that we are talking about and that we are accusing the Baird campaign of. And he is using your taxpayer dollars and the frank mail privilege to campaign against a primary contender. This is all of our accusations, and these are all of his responses. That is unethical. And we've already written the law against it. You're not supposed to be able to do this. So either this is breaking the law, or once again, it just proves that it doesn't matter how many laws you write. Those people in D.C., the judges down in the Indiana Supreme Court, the appellate court, your local election board, they will use this lawfare against you. They have no concept of the law of the land, no concept of fundamental law. They know codes and statutes. They'll manipulate them or they'll outright break them. So the first one, Baird, which one is this?
Baird didn't stand with airline pilots who were fired for not getting COVID vaccines.
Yeah.
And the fact that, well, let me read what Baird said he wanted, if you can't see it there. Representative Baird fights for the people and champions the idea of a smaller government. That is political speak. It means nothing. It's hollow. He maintains that the federal government should not possess the authority to mandate hiring and firing decisions for private businesses, which is why he voted for the FAA reauthorization bill. Well, facts have a funny way of sticking in, right? When you're told a mistruth, the truth are the cracks in that lie. When it starts to fall apart, it's because the truth is crushing it. Let's go to Charles. Let's go to you should be able to read this one here. I'll let you take it from there.
I can read them. I want to talk about this one real quick.
Okay.
That's it. Yeah, that's the okay, you got that. Yeah.
Yep.
The fact is it just I'm just thinking off the top of my head because I've been thinking about these for a while, but the airline industry is the most regulated industry in the United States. Arguably one of the most. So that's gaslighting. It's disingenuous for a congressman to say, oh, well, I couldn't vote for that. That's a private business. He has voted for bills that continue to regulate private businesses, including the airline industry. And this is it's a hollow response that is not based in fact. And he thinks that we're all morons to buy this. And the fact is the reason that they had to reauthorize these pilots was because of an intervention in the government that they lost their jobs. Now, they may say, well, we didn't mandate vaccines. That might be true. But they offered up an exorbitant amount of money for these airlines to save them because they had just locked down the United States and the world. Everyone was struggling. So they held this carrot out and said, we're going to give you however many $100 million. But if you take the money, it will come with mask mandates in your airports and on your planes and vaccine mandates. So that is misleading and disingenuous. And I'm just so incensed that they think we're this stupid.
Well, and that's it right there. That's it right there. Let's move to the next one. Issue number 2. The myth, Baird co-sponsored a bill that gave $400 million for vaccine tracking. In here, he says it's a total lie. Go ahead, Charles.
That he cares about health records and that they should remain private. The bill he co-sponsored prevents databases 1519 American Rescue Plan from federal government tracking. I heard Dan Crenshaw say the same thing. And again, do you want to send someone back to Washington, D.C. that has no spine, that they are going to co-sponsor a bill that in 2021, when the CDC was caught lying to the American people, caught flip-flopping on issues, the CDC is proven to be a vaccine manufacturer that profits off of vaccines, that at that time, he decided that instead of fighting back against it and putting up a fight by a liberal HR 1319, he's instead going to make a less onerous bill and just give them $400 million to create the database that tracks whether you're vaccinated or not. Yep. That's another difference, the philosophical difference between a fighter and someone that's complicit in the taking of our money and our freedoms.
Well, let's talk about what the facts are here with what we're actually talking about. The cold hard facts about H.R. 550, co-sponsored by Representative Baird, and this is from the actual bill. So when Jim Baird says in his document right here that it's a flat out lie, it's a bold-faced lie, this is what the bill itself says. This bill directs the Department of Health and Human Services, HHS, to take actions to improve data sharing and other aspects of immunization information systems. That's a mouthful. These are confidential, population-based databases. Those are things that hold records, that track you, that maintain a record of vaccine administrations.
Yeah. And when have these ever, one, not been weaponized against you?
Yep.
And two, if it maintains a record of vaccine administrations, then it also, by default, maintains a record of people who did not get vaccinated.
Because what's not there is just as important as what's there when
Absolutely.
you're tracking.
That's
they know
right.
who you are. They can cross reference these databases and find out that you've been vaccinated, you haven't, now you're on a list.
Absolutely.
And if you don't think that'll happen, and by the way, I don't know if Jim Baird thinks this way. I don't know if he realizes how government actually works and how it works against the people on a number of different occasions. Either he's complicit, he agrees with it, or he's inept and doesn't understand the system that he's working in. It's time that we get somebody that does. Moving to the next one here. The next one here I think is important as well. The myth is that Baird voted for a $113 billion Ukraine aid package, bringing us closer to nuclear war with Russia. Now, I don't know if you've ever said that. Maybe you have. But he's convoluting two different issues. Go ahead and take it off with the fact what he wants us to believe there, Charles.
That he knows that Russia is emboldened by weakness, not strength. That he supported the original aid package to help Ukraine fight Russian expansion. However, he voted against multiple successive bills due to concerns that the money was not being spent efficiently. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm a student of history, a student of economics. I'm a student of war and a combat veteran. And I did not need an example of Ukraine to demonstrate that they were going to not spend that money efficiently. I didn't need that because I'm not a moron.
And you're not corrupt.
And I'm not corrupt. And to act like that was something that wouldn't be noticed is again disingenuous. Well, and Russian is emboldened by weakness, not strength. That is, again, not the reason or the root cause of why Russia invaded Ukraine. People act like this happened. This started 2 years ago.
Right.
Well, the Putin interview proved that wasn't the case. Pat Buchanan proved that in 1990 when he said that the United States needs to pull out of NATO as soon as it achieved its goal. And the original goal of NATO was to stop the spread of the USSR. And when the USSR collapsed, then Pat Buchanan and other paleo conservatives said, it is time to get ourselves out of NATO. And we should have heeded his advice then.
Yep. Because what it sounds like is that Jim Baird sounds like John Kerry. I was before it, before I was against it. And the second question I have to ask, Charles, and answer this, if Russia is emboldened by weakness, why did Baird say that his vote was a vote for strength, and then he stopped doing it? If we're still worried about Russia, does the misspending of money really matter at that point?
Right.
Does that sound like a red herring to you?
Yeah, it's like if that's weakness is an existential threat, then it wouldn't matter if there was money being wasted. I mean, the United States military wastes money, and he still votes for all those. So I don't think that's what it is. I think that he sensed and knew. I was campaigning at the time. I was talking about this. I was against this from day one. Again, because I'm a student of history. I don't need to see them waste our taxpayer dollars to be proven they're going to waste our taxpayer dollars. I watch my own government waste our taxpayer dollars in every single thing they do. I mean, I don't need any more examples.
No, we don't need any more. The same thing with Israel. I feel for the people of Israel. I feel for the people of Palestine. The people, not the governments. But the money doesn't go to the people. It goes to the governments. And that's what we're trying to stop spending. Issue number 4 is the myth is Baird voted against cutting the budget of the main government agency involved in censoring American citizens online.
Yeah, Representative Baird is committed to preserving your right to free speech online. He voted to reject the Biden administration budget request of $3 trillion for the agency responsible for online censorship in the Department of Homeland Security's appropriation bill of 2023. Now let's pull up that
24.
Or 2024, yeah.
Yep. You know what? You may have that right. That may be right. I may have mistyped that. Here's what's actually going on, and I think this is interesting. Baird voted for 4367, the Department of Homeland Security, DHS Appropriations Act 2024. He voted for that, so I did have it right. It is 2024. Yeah. He voted for that, but voted no to all of these. Go ahead, Charles. Can you read those?
You go ahead and read them. I can't see them as well.
Baird voted no. That's roll call number 446 on House Amendment 400 to prohibit using funds to pay the salary and expenses of CISA Director Jen Easterly. So he had the opportunity to stop the program in its tracks. To stop he didn't do that. He didn't take action, right? Inaction is as much a decision as action is. So when they're not acting, they're agreeing with what's going on.
Yeah, and this is how Congress is supposed to rein in these rogue agencies. Like, this is what we have to do, people. When we go out and talking to people, like that question that Amanda asked me, like, what can we do? We have to be able to take bold things. You have to take their money away. Like Vivek Ramaswamy was saying something. We have to cut these agencies by 75%. We have to take these bureaucrats that make millions and millions of dollars on our money. They eat at the finest restaurants. They travel for free. They are supported by the lobbyists because they vote for and support these industries. This is how you do it. The Department of Homeland Security, it was established in 2001. It's done nothing to secure our homeland. They've done nothing to secure our borders. The TSA has done nothing to stop anything. They fail 98% of the tests that go through the TSA. It's just another bureaucratic agency that's a $1 trillion agency that they've weaponized against us. And if you want change in America, you have to vote for people and put people in there that they are going to tell the FIFA director, Jen Easterly, to go find another job. Yep. You're fired.
You're not going to come and censor us. And by the way, this is one of my issues. Free speech is one of my issues. Without our speech, Charles, we don't have anything else. And that's when we lose our speech, that's when the firearms come out. And nobody wants that. Mm-hmm. Nobody wants violence.
Nobody wants that.
But our founding fathers, why did they rise up? They were British citizens. And the reason they rose up is not because they wanted to overthrow the king, is because they wanted their rights back. Mm-hmm. They kept petitioning the king. We want to exercise all the rights that Englishmen in London get to exercise.
Yeah.
That's
just
all they
like
wanted.
When Paul was about to be killed in Rome, he asked the guard, like, hey, are you going to do this to a Roman? It's the same thing. The Americans said, hey, King George, we're British. Are you going to do this to Britain? And he said, yeah, we're going to pay for all this through oppressing you and taking your money. Yep. So they said, hey, and what we're saying right now is, hey, Republicans and Democrats, we're Americans. What are you doing to us? You can't censor us. You can't, we've got to defund these agencies. We've got to hold them accountable.
And given the opportunity to do that, Jim Baird voted no.
He failed.
Continue to let them censor the American people. He said no. He didn't rise up when he had the opportunity. He didn't do what he should have done. Let's move on to the next topic here.
And this is in light of the Obama administration, I think, overturning the Mutt-Smith Act. So think about that too.
Yeah, Smith-Mutt Modernization Act. People don't know about that. We can get that in. By the way, you've got a ton of questions we're going to get to here at the end, but we want to go through this Jim Baird thing and present it. And as soon as we get that done, we're going to go through all the questions that are coming in through Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and so on. The myth that Jim is saying that is out there, it's a lie about him, is that Baird voted for red flag provisions in the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA. The fact Baird wants you to believe is that Representative Baird knows, this is what he says, Representative Baird knows the Second Amendment is a foundational constitutional right. Nobody in Congress is a bigger supporter of the military than Representative Baird. Okay, again, that's political speak. It means nothing. That's, in colloquial terms, he's blowing sunshine out his butt. Nobody in Congress is a bigger supporter of the military than Representative Baird. I agree with that. He's a military man. I can see that. But he didn't act like that. He voted for the initial version of the 2022 NDAA to prioritize troop pay and readiness. That he did. That's what he focused on, knowing that the red flag provisions would be removed in the final bill. How could he know that? He didn't know that.
Well, he signed a letter.
He signed a tersely worded letter requesting that the Senate remove that before they put it back to the House. They asked for that to be done. There's no guarantee that that was going to happen, folks. Jim Baird voted for a bill that had red flag laws in it against our military and removed their right to due process. And he says that he's for the military and then says, well, I asked them to take it back out. You can't vote for a bill that you don't fully support. Why would you vote for a bill that you don't fully support? I'll tell you why. Well, it's not important for me to tell you why. Charles, you tell him why he voted for a bill.
Well, I don't know what you have on there, but it's my guess that he may not even have known. And that is a risk that I would not have taken with our Second Amendment. And here's why. We have red flag laws in Indiana. the Indiana Republicans passed red flag laws. So to act like this can't happen in our military is a risk that I would not take, first of all.
Yep.
And second of all, that is such an important amendment and such an important right that we have, our God-given right to protect ourselves. I would never take that risk, and I would negotiate. I mean, I wouldn't even negotiate. That is a non-negotiable. There's no negotiating.
Well, here's what I find interesting. So I'll read this for you. Baird voted yay on roll call number 293 for the final passage of H.R. 4350 in the 117th Congress, which contains red flag language in Section 529 of the bill. The bill itself received 31 amendments in the House, none from Jim Baird. Jim Baird could have amended that. He didn't. He wrote a heated letter with 100 other people saying, hey, I think we made a mistake in voting for this bill because we didn't know what was in it. I think that's what happened. I don't know for sure.
Too. They didn't know what's in it.
Yep.
And that's why I've committed to people that when given a 7,000-page bill and 3 days to vote in it, I'm not going to do it. We can't do that anymore. Nope. We can't rely on them to just tell the leadership to say or let Nancy Pelosi to say, just pass it and we'll figure out what's in it. And then giving these administrative agencies the authority to fill out this infrastructure in these bills and write this administrative law. That's over. We can't do that anymore. It's not business as usual anymore. I would never negotiate with our Second Amendment rights.
I agree 100%. Issue number, I think this is number 5 or 6. The myth is that Baird voted for a massive spending deal in 2022 that didn't stop Biden's Green New Deal, end COVID, or end the vaccine mandate for our troops. The fact that he gives you here, that he wants you to believe, is that Representative Baird is committed to ending Biden's wasteful policy agenda. That's up for debate. He voted against the omnibus spending bills. In 2022 and 2023, he also voted to terminate the COVID national emergency and the initial 2023 NDAA, which ended vaccine mandates for our troops. And what's the truth on that, Charles?
I'm just going to make a comment. I'll let you read the cold hard facts. I like that better. But look, I just want to make these comments. Look at the dates on these. We announced our candidacy in May of 2022, and it is known that when you primary an incumbent, it forces that incumbent to listen to their constituency and it holds them accountable. There's a reason that Jim Baird voted for the first time against an NDAA in maybe 2020, the end of 2023. There's a reason that Jim Baird for the first time voted against an omnibus spending bill. There's a reason that Jim Baird in the last few months has actually had some conservative votes. The reason, you're looking at the reason. This is how it happens. You put primary challengers, pull the Republicans back to the right where they should be. And if they don't, if I lose the primary, Jim Baird is going to go right back to his big government Baird habits. Now, what are the cold hard facts, Kramer?
Well, the cold hard facts is what you just talked about. That's what we kind of talked about the other day. This is slide 6 and 7, which are combined, and I think we had to talk about it all at the same thing because there's too many issues here to talk about. Let me bring this back in here. I didn't have either of those ready to go. Let me bring this in real quick so you can see it. The myth that they want you to believe is point number 7 on that sheet. Do you still have it there in front of you?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So fact number 7 is that the myth is that Baird voted to raise the debt ceiling to allow the U.S. to accrue unlimited debt. And the fact is, Baird wants you to believe is that Representative Baird is protecting your hard-earned money and cutting wasteful spending. He sent you a flyer that cost how much money to tell you how much money he's saving you? That doesn't make sense. I spent money to show you how much I'm saving you. He voted for the Fiscal Responsibility Act, which is estimated to reduce spending by $2 trillion, according to the Congressional Budget Office. And this is what's interesting to me, is he said he's going to claw back unspent COVID funds while fully funding Social Security, Medicare, and it's all bullshit, right? None of that matters, right? That last stuff is just that.
Who voted for the COVID funds?
Yeah, who voted for that?
Who voted for the COVID funds? You mean that he voted to claw back money that he irresponsibly voted for the COVID funds?
Well, and on his website, or on the congressional website, he posted, and I wish I'd brought it up, but he posted that one of the reasons that he didn't go for Biden's new spending deal is because, well, we still had COVID money to use. Money from COVID that was already there that we could go ahead and utilize that. That was his reason. Now here he says that he's trying to claw back the COVID dollars. Folks, you can't have it both ways. And when you look at it from the perspective of a logical person, my dad used to say, I think he's peeing on my leg and trying to convince me it's raining outside.
Yeah,
and I
have
think that's
that
where
same
we're at.
feeling.
Yeah. We're going to take a break here. We'll come back and start answering some of these questions. Are you done? Are you happy? Or you want to close out on this?
Yeah,
Do you think it's
man. Let's get these questions.
okay? Before we go, I think it's important to tell you the world that we're currently living in. It's being reported right now out of Tennessee. The Biden regime sues state of Tennessee over law punishing prostitutes for knowingly spreading HIV. Biden says you can't do that. Why? Well, it violates the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Yeah, I mean, that's just incredible. I haven't seen that. I haven't heard of that. But that is just a complete gaslighting, again, of what are the responsibilities of government, what they should be doing and what they shouldn't be doing. They manipulate these laws. I don't even know why President Biden would come out would say something like that.
Because they're desperate. They've got to have something. Biden is in trouble. In fact, not only is Biden in trouble, but the rhinos are in trouble. That's why we've seen so many abandon running again in 2024, because they know they're in trouble or they sense something in the air. I think that they sense that the American people are done. The electorate is done with them, and they want to move on, and they want to get people to do what you're doing. Right? The reason I jump behind your campaign is not because you're promising me something. It's because you're saying just the opposite.
I got nothing to promise.
You
I
have
promise
nothing to
you,
give me.
I'll fight for your freedom.
Right.
I promise
That's
you.
it.
And any donor that gives me money, it comes with no promises other than I am a constitutionalist. I believe in the fundamental law, the law of the land, and I'm going to fight for that every single day. Why? Because I want it. It's something that I personally want, and I want to bequeath it to my own children. And so I got nothing for you other than fighting for for the fundamental law and to preserve the United States of America, the greatest country, the greatest, what is it? I can't remember the word, but practice, the greatest trial, the greatest experiment the greatest experiment in government, in self-government is the United States of America, which they're taken away from us. In my own lifetime, I've seen it just completely slip away. It's frightening.
And
what
it's
are
going to
other
get worse.
questions?
It's going to get worse. Well, let's take a break, and then we'll come back with the questions.
Yep.
I'm Charles Bookwalter, and I'm running to represent you in Indiana's 4th Congressional District. Why am I running? Simple. The out-of-control spending, well, it's out of control, and somebody has to do something about it. Take, for example, this taxpayer-funded billboard that was strategically placed by Representative Baird in front of my Frankfort, Indiana, Jimmy John's franchise. Nice one, Jim. Now, to the untrained eye, this billboard looks exactly like a campaign ad, but it's not. It's franked mail. It's your tax dollars being used by an incumbent to remind you of all the reasons that you should go vote for them. And every day I leave work, I'm reminded exactly why I'm running for Congress. Jim Baird won't let me forget. Thanks, Jim. I'm Charles Bookwalter, and I approve this message.
And that was,
back.
by the
Hold
way,
on a second, Charles. Welcome back. We're doing the Charles Bookwalter Digital Town Hall. If you've never seen us do this before, it gives you a unique opportunity to talk to the candidates, in particular, Charles Bookwalter, the only candidate that I'm concerned about, who's running for the 4th District in Indiana. If you want to find out more about him, you can go to bookwalterforcongress.com or search for him for Bookwalter for Congress on Facebook. And let's get him back in here. Charles, go ahead.
Yeah, that, by the way, that billboard that Jim Baird put out was franked mail. It's a campaign ad. It was put out right in front of my Jimmy John's. There's billboards all over the 4th District that taxpayers paid for. And I want to make this clear before I take our first question. Jim Baird in 2023 raised $100,000 from lobbyists and PACs, and he raised $40,000 from individual contributors, most of who do not reside in Indiana or the 4th Congressional District. And he spent $50,000 on small dollar fundraising. Our campaign, so it was actually under, his numbers were 138. Our campaign raised in that same time frame $139,000. We outraised the incumbent. 60,000 of that was my own contribution that I put towards the campaign, and we raised $90K in individual contributions from people within the 4th Congressional District. Like, it's incredible. That's what gives me hope that we have a real shot here. Now, Jim Baird he loaned his campaign $170K. So that what he's sitting on, a half of it is a loan to himself. So they're not raising a lot of money, and they don't have a lot of money to spend, because my guess is he would like to recoup that $170K
right.
that he loaned to his campaign.
Right, exactly. They rarely want to actually have their money spent. Again, That's why he's using franked mail.
Look, I don't hate him for that. I know the feeling.
Yep.
I'm invested in this too.
Let's look at the first question here from Jennifer Beyer. How do we turn the Baird campaign in for breaking the law?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jennifer Beyer, for doing that. Can we bring that up,
Sure.
Kramer? I think that you have that.
Yep,
I am asking everyone tonight to go to the Committee on Ethics. What do you have the URL there?
I don't. It's a long one.
Okay. You can search for it, Committee on Ethics. They also have a Twitter feed. It's at Congress Ethics. I encourage you to contact the committee and file a report for the Congressional Ethics Committee against Jim Baird using the franked mail privilege to campaign. This is what the website looks like. At the bottom, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll see the numbers and the email update sign up where you can complain to the Committee on Ethics that Congressman Baird is using this. And every single Hoosier in the 4th District should be incensed. We have one billboard because we have to pay for it.
Right.
We cannot afford to send out these huge mailers answering selling to the people of the 4th District, because it's very expensive to do this. We can't do a lot of things because we don't have the money to do it. Yet Jim Baird is not spending his donations from lobbyists to campaign. He's using our taxpayer dollars to campaign and answer the questions that we are bringing up. It should be offensive to every Hoosier.
So the answer to the question is call the number tomorrow, or you can call them now. The lines are actually open 24/7. You'll leave a message anyway. But the phone number is 202-225-7103. That's 202-225-7103 to complain about what Jim Baird is doing with your tax dollars. Folks, people ask all the time, what can I do? What can I do? This is one small thing you can do. Will it make a difference? No, but it put a thorn in their side. They have to act to this.
Difference. Look, it may make a difference. It may mean we have a strategy that we're going to do the same thing, and that we're going to contact the speaker about this as well. This is unethical and immoral, and it may be that it was approved by someone that shouldn't approve this campaign literature. I need everyone out there, whether you're in Alabama or Iowa, you should all be offended too. That money is your taxpayer dollars going to a sitting incumbent to run a campaign. That was never the intention of the franked mail privilege.
And if it's a privilege, it can be taken back away.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
This is one of those things that it's used and abused. Another question here from Heather. She's asking, what's your biggest concern about the next 6 to 8 months?
Well, my short-term concerns are border and inflation and war. Those are my 3 short-term concerns right now. I am a strong advocate for pulling our military out of these interventions all over the world, bringing them home and stacking them up on the border to do what they were meant to do, which is defend our homeland. But not just that, bringing our men home back into our communities, these patriotic, conservative men that go fight in the military, bringing them home so that they can fight back against this culture war that we're losing in America. And inflation is another thing that is very concerning because, it's going to get to the point where it's hard to afford anything, to drive around, to get food, and that's all because of this Green New Deal energy scam and all that. War also is very important to me because I've said it before. I believe that war will be the opportunity for all of the establishment to cover up all of these issues that are so important to us. If the United States gets drawn into a world war where Russia and Iran have united, and there's a unified front against America and some European countries, we're pulled into world war. We will forget about the border. We will forget about our medical liberties. We will forget about inflation. We will forget about the usurpation of all of these responsibilities that we're supposed to have. The same thing happened during World War II. All those issues will go away, and they'll point to people like me, and they'll say, how unpatriotic of you. You need to support your country. You need to support our men and women overseas. That's what frightens me about going to world war. All of these issues, our border issue will go away, and they will flood in our borders.
Yep.
And the long-term, I think the long-term concern, well, she has 6 to 8 months, but the long-term concern is still a 6 to 8 month concern. It's apathy.
Right.
It's apathy, people. You've got to get engaged. If good people don't get involved, the bad people are going to be running
That's right.
our government, and they
that's
are.
That's
They're in your election boards. They're in your local governments. They're in your county commissioner spots. They're your precinct committeemen. They're the teachers that are indoctrinating and grooming your children. They are right there involved in your community.
That's the question, right? Everyone asks you, who are they? When you say they, who are you? Who are they? Are they somebody in Davos or in Washington, D.C.? No, they're in our backyard.
Yes. They're your Karen neighbor that is a part of the HOA that doesn't want you to fly an American flag. They're the election board that won't give you 15 minutes and won't take one of your questions and show transparency in our elections. They're the Indiana Supreme Court justices that uphold a 6-year holdout of making you wait 6 years to run for office. They're the attorneys that don't argue fundamental law that get wrapped up in codes and statutes. They're the local politician that votes to allow solar fields to come into your backyard or allow central Soviet-style planning in our own state of America. They're right here in our state, in your communities. That's the they. And so apathy has allowed the they to take complete control of our lives and expand their reach into our lives. And we need good people like those that are watching tonight to not be apathetic and to engage in this process, to support grassroots candidates and get involved themselves in local government.
I agree 100%. Stan Issa asks, what is your plan for the border?
I just said it. Like, that is what our military is for, is to defend the United States of America. It is not to defend the borders of Jordan. It's not to have 800 bases in 180 countries overseas. It's not meant to go do the things that they're doing right now. We have overextended ourselves in the world. Rome did the same thing before the fall of Rome. We have to bring our troops home and focus on our domestic problems here at home. Our military should be stacked. We don't even need a wall. We need our military on our border. That's what we need. And another thing that I've talked about a lot is we need the federal government to stop politicizing this border issue and give the resources and the autonomy to these border states to deal with this issue.
Right.
Texas has already proven that they'll do what it takes to stop people from coming in their border. They're the closest to it, and they need to be given this responsibility. We have built up $1 trillion industry, so-called border patrol and homeland security, and we've given them all this responsibility and all this power and all this authority, and those managers are mismanaging it. It's never been more porous. It's never been worse. We've never had a more of an invasion than we have right now. That we need to remove that responsibility from the federal government and deposit that responsibility to those closest to the issue, which is the border states. That's what I would be behind.
Pan Fisher from Facebook asked, inflation's out of control. Bread, bacon, milk, everything's through the roof. How do we get this back under control?
Yeah, I'm asking Pam to go to understand what inflation really is. We talked about it a little bit before. Inflation is a policy. It is a policy of printing off money, and inflation is a result of deficit spending. The United States Congress has to do their job, and their job is to control these rogue agencies through the budgetary process. We've got to reduce these agencies. We have to reduce their budgets, and we have to get this deficit spending out of control. That means you do not, the House, which is great that they're not doing, you do not give Ukraine $98 billion. That's what you don't do.
Right. Again. After we already know that they've wasted how much, and there's no accounting for it. Ellen O'Brien asked on Facebook, we will forget about the elections in 2024? The free and fair elections?
Yes. If we go to war, I don't know what she's alluding to, but if we go to war, election integrity isn't an issue anymore. Democrats will get elected if we're in a war footing. All those establishment Republicans will prey on your patriotism, and they will ask for your reelection. War will create a focus solely on war, and we will forget about these election issues that are so important, like one national day of election, like eliminating the fraud and abuse that occurs in the elections. It'll stop this grassroots fight we have to really actually have free and fair elections in the United States. We cannot let the war machine and these corrupt politicians get us in another world war that Americans will completely lose focus on these domestic issues that are more important than what's going on in Ukraine and Russian affairs that has been going on for thousands of years, for centuries. And the same with Israel and Gaza. Yep. These are 4,000-year-old conflicts. Americans don't even know what's going on in Kentucky or Kansas or Alaska. Americans don't even know what's going on in their own schools. You don't even know what the curriculum is. And Americans think that they know what's better for Ukraine and Russian affairs. It's laughable to think that Americans can tell these other countries 10,000 miles away how they need to run their own country when we can't even run our own schools. It's offensive.
Well, and more importantly, Charles, government is supposed to be we the people. I think that what we've forgotten is that we the people is us. They're managers. They're nothing more than the people that we've said, hey, listen, we don't have time to do this. Go take care of this stuff. And for whatever reason, they've gotten into their mind that they're the bosses.
Yeah. I suggest you don't even call. And I stole this from my brother, who's actually, he stepped up to the plate, and he's running for state Senate and Senate District 7 in Indiana. And he said, I'm going to stop calling these people congressman and senator, and I'm just going to start calling them manager in their last name, because they're not representing us. And I thought, Joseph, it's very insightful and observant. They are not representing us. It is we the people, and yet they don't do anything that we want. They are managing, and we know what they're doing. They're managing their personal affairs and the finances of their friends through us. That's what they're managing. They're managing their careers, they're managing their own interests, and they're not representing us.
Well, a good example is from the Gateway Pundit this afternoon. Illinois lawmaker proposes labeling parents as abusers for denying minor children sex changes.
Yeah.
Talk about the management class.
I don't even want to say that is an objective truth. That is that they're trying to create a whole new narrative. It's anti-God. It's laughable. I mean, I don't even.
Did you have an opportunity to see any of the interview with Tucker Carlson and Putin?
I haven't watched the whole thing yet. It's hard to get through that entire thing.
It is. Well, when you listen to it, it's a 2-hour history lesson of Russia and who they are as a people and what their boundaries have been. And what they're saying, which is interesting to me, they're saying Russia used to be this big, right? And a group over here came and colonized part of us, and we want it back. And Democrats are against that when they're telling us that we should give America back to the Native Americans.
Yeah.
I mean, the duplicity of how Democrats think and how they can say one thing over here and another thing over here, and they're diametrically opposed to each other, and they can't see it. Well, it's not just Democrats. It's our rhinos as well. And I know some Republicans don't like to hear the name rhino, but Jeff Flake, Mitt Romney, they're rhinos. They're Republican in name only. They do not vote with the American people. They're not concerned about you and I. They're concerned about their big money. They're concerned about Bain Investments. They're concerned about BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street. That's who they're appeasing. They couldn't care less about us.
Why is that? Why is that? We know why it is. It's because that's their constituency. That's who pays their bills. That's who contributes to all their. That's who pays for all the RNC. And frankly, and we all know it, the Indiana Republican Party is full of Democrats. It's run by Democrats. Holcomb is a World Economic Forum lackey, has brought the Indiana Economic Forum to Indiana. We're literally fighting this global battle right here in our backyards in Indiana as the Indiana Republicans deposit these World Economic Forum ideas in our own backyard through the Indiana Economic Development Corporation. They're doing the same thing at a national level through this green energy scam. This is a World Economic Forum scam being perpetrated on us in our own backyard. Wake up, America.
It's time to wake up. Charles, that does it for the questions here. We got a couple of others, but you've already answered those. So I'm telling people to go back and watch the beginning of it here because it's basic stuff. But I think that it's important for those of the Indiana's fourth to realize our nation is at a crossroads. We're in trouble. And for those of you who think that, well, voting doesn't work because the voting's rigged, you still got to vote. We've got to fix it. And I think, and this is a question for me. We've got a situation where tons of people don't trust the vote. They don't trust what's happening in the country. They don't trust leadership. They don't trust the politicians. They don't trust the mainstream media. And when people like yourself stand up to run, the question is asked, why should I trust you? Why should we trust you, Charles?
Well, I've demonstrated. I've said this to people. Look at people's past. Look at their record. When my company started mandating vaccines and the hospital, I walked away from an incredibly lucrative career. When the state government came in and tried to lock me down and mask my employees, I told them, no, I'm not doing it. I didn't rearrange. I didn't rearrange my tables. I didn't change my restaurant at all. It was like 2019 the entire time. I didn't force masks on my employees. I stood up to the COVID regime. When they try to pass silly bills in the Indiana State House, I go down there and testify against it. And, and locally, I'm fighting for local election integrity laws. I, too, don't trust the system because they're not being transparent. But you know how we could? You know what would give me real faith in the system is if all of you come out and vote. We need an overwhelming win. They talk about having a mandate when you run. Could you imagine if Hoosiers come out, patriotic Hoosiers come out and support a candidate like me? It will be disruptive. I'm telling you, I will go there and I will rub their faces in the feces that they have put all over our country.
Yep.
And that's what it takes. A spine. Like Steve Bannon says, we need people with a titanium spine. I have served my country. I went and fought for my country. I'm not afraid to do it. I've just realized now that our fight isn't in Afghanistan.
No.
Our fight is not in Iran. Our fight is not in Ukraine or Israel or South America or the Philippines or China. Our fight is right here at home right now. And you need to join this fight. We have a mandate in here and we send more patriots to Washington, D.C. We will absolutely turn this country around in short order. We'll protect that border. We'll defund these agencies. We will change inflation, reduce inflation, and we will increase our stature in the world. So a constituent today I was talking to didn't really agree with my position on Ukraine. He said, well, if we pull out, isn't Iran and Russia and all these countries going to unify against us? And I said, they're unified against us because of our aggressive foreign policy. If we step back and we come back and we take a more peaceful position in foreign policy, no, I think those countries would be happy and would not. No one's coming over to attack us on our homeland. Like the Emperor of Japan says, there's an American behind every blade of grass with the firearm. Well, you'll find me with more than one firearm behind that blade of grass.
Here's another one. Talking about these agencies that are out of control, Charles, again, being reported by the Gateway Pundit, the FDA director, Dr. Peter Marks, admits to expediting approval of Pfizer COVID vaccine, potentially to meet mandate guidelines.
That's why someone asked me today. It was a former nurse, and she didn't agree with my position on vaccines. She said, "Why didn't you want the vaccine?" I said, "Because I was 45 at the time. It was an emergency use authorization for the vaccine. It was untested. It was new technology, and I didn't want to have it. I believe in in natural immunity, not vaccine-induced immunity. I understand medicine, and I did not want it. And that's my choice. I believe in medical freedom and informed consent, and I don't want to have it. And anytime that they mandate an emergency use on something that they're making a fortune on, you should be concerned. This is them making money, and we all know it. Yeah. This is about them keeping you unhealthy, so you need them to give you a vaccine or whatever.
And it's important to understand that prior to COVID, Moderna, Pfizer, and these other large manufacturers, these other large drug companies were in trouble. They were financially in trouble. Pfizer had been hit, I believe it was in 2009, with the largest criminal penalty ever because they lied to doctors. They lied in studies. They had to pay a $2 billion fine. Why? Because they're liars. And then we're supposed to believe everything that they said 6, 7, 8 years later? No.
Yep. And it's same with Merck, and it's same with Glaxo. In reality, these are criminal organizations that have criminal penalties against them in hundreds of billions of dollars because they've injured, harmed, and maimed Americans. And right now, according to Dr. Malone, there have been 17 million excess deaths in America, in the world, that are unexplained, and over 600,000 in America. Excess unexplained deaths that most people think or can attribute, in my estimation, to these vaccines. I think vaccines are responsible for a lot of things that we really never have thought about before. Conditions, skin conditions, allergic reactions, autism, all kinds of things, because no one's ever studied this very deeply.
And by the way, for the people, the naysayers, it's been studied. It has not. The people that did the studies for these were being paid for an answer. They were not being paid for a study. The people that sponsored the studies wanted a negative answer because they were the ones responsible for the vaccines. You have to know who's doing the studies. You can't just say, well, this study proves it doesn't.
Yep.
When you know who's paying for it.
Side by side, there've never been side by side studies done either. They've never done it before. The vaccine companies are the ones that do. I worked for a pharma company in my young age. I understand how these things are done. And frankly, when you call on doctors and surgeons and you take them, by the time I was a senior rep for Intuitive Surgical and Medical Devices, I didn't even take these studies to doctors. No doctor looked at these studies. They said this exact same thing. I called on doctors, primary care, and surgeons for over a decade. Those doctors don't look at these studies. They don't look at them. They don't trust them because they know where these studies come from. They come from the manufacturer of the device or of the pharmaceutical. Right. Anyone in the industry knows that to be the fact.
Yep. What happens is these companies, they submit a report about how dangerous or the side effects of their product, whatever. They submit that to the federal government. The federal government does not come and test that material. The FDA does not test anything. They trust the manufacturer to do that testing for them and submit their results. And that's why Pfizer in particular got in trouble, because they lied about it.
Yeah. Yep. I'm telling you, Kramer, this is not an exaggeration. Doctors and surgeons do not listen to sales rep studies.
Yep.
They do not listen. They won't even, if it happens to come with a lunch, they'll eat your lunch and they'll listen to you. But if you have a good relationship with one of them, a close relationship, they'll look at you and say, dude, come on. Right. What are you doing? I'm not interested in that study. I know how this stuff works.
Right. Well, we're going to take another break, and when we come back, we're going to wrap things up. We'll be right back after this.
Who is Charles Bookwalter? Charles is a husband, father, entrepreneur, and former Green Beret. But most importantly, Charles Bookwalter is a constitutional conservative. Charles Bookwalter will work to close our borders, ensuring the safety and security of our nation. Charles will fight to secure your personal medical freedoms, giving you complete control over your own healthcare decisions. And Charles Bookwalter will continue his fight to secure our elections, ensuring every vote counts. On May 7th, you have a choice.
I'm Charles Bookwalter, and I approve this message.
As we wrap up here, Charles, what would you like to say in closing? I think it's important for the people to start to understand how dire the situation is, and that a vote for Jim Baird is a vote for the status quo.
Yeah, that's right. I just can't reinforce it enough that, you may not agree with me on everything. And I get that. You're never going to agree with everyone on anything. But people are passionate about a number of these issues that we do agree on. And if you want to see change in your lifetime, in Indiana, and in America, then you have to be prepared to take bold action. We all know what I'm saying is the truth. We all know that these politicians and these bureaucrats are completely corrupt to the core. They're not Republicans. They're not Democrats. They're captured. They're captured by the system. And you have to start considering voting for someone that's actually saying this stuff now. I am on the record challenging them for what they're doing. And if you want to be your representative that represents that point of view in Congress, then you need to ask them the positions now. I make it very clear. I do this 2 hours. We've been doing this every Thursday. I'm not hiding behind any of these positions. Again, you may not agree with any of it, but if you believe in medical liberty, I will fight for your medical liberty. Congressman Baird will not. If you believe that we are extended overseas and we should not be intervening in other countries, I will fight against that and bring our troops home. Jim Baird will not do that, and he's proven that. If you don't believe that we have free and fair elections, I've already proven I'm fighting that right now at our local level. Jim Baird is not fighting for that. If you don't believe in the Green New Deal energy scam and you're concerned that they are trying to control and manipulate our food supplies and create this niche market that only enriches a few of their friends, I see through that scam and I'm against it. Jim Baird co-sponsored 4824. He's spearheading carbon sequestration right here in Indiana. So you may not agree with everything, but if you want a fighter that's got a spine, then you need to support my campaign. And oh, by the way, we need some money. So donate to my campaign. Yep. Go to my website. Go look at it. You can donate through WinRed, but go down to the bottom. There's a P.O. Box, P.O. Box 43. Send a check. Give until it hurts. That's what it takes.
Yep. We are in dire straits in this nation, folks, and it's up to you. I know people keep talking about, term limits. They think that that's the solution. Jim Baird is limited already to his term. It's 2 years.
That's right. It's you.
It's you.
It's up to
you
to
have
vote.
to enforce the term limit and say you're done. And the way that you do that is vote for anybody but the incumbent in this case, right? In this case right now, the only person that's worth voting for is Charles Bookwalter because he's on the ground. He's been knocking on doors. He's all throughout the district. Charles, can we talk real quickly about what we have coming up? Tomorrow night, there's a fundraiser in Martinsville at Fox Cliff Country Club, I believe it is. Is that correct?
Fox Cliff Country Club in Martinsville, Indiana. That'll be at 5:30 p.m. I'm looking forward to people. It's a small fundraiser, so it's as much as you want to give, obviously, but just to get in the door, it's $50 a person, $100 per family. That's on Friday, Fox Cliff Country Golf Club in Martinsville, Indiana. Then we have a few big events coming up on Monday, one of which, and we should have had the flyer up ready today, but there's a big event going on in Kentucky that is a Revival Veterans event. It's a General Flynn event, and we will be down there speaking at that event with the Flynn campaign, just engaging a lot of patriots and veterans down there, and I will be speaking down there. I'm also speaking at the Service Members Club here in Indianapolis at 12 o'clock on Monday morning, and then heading down to Kentucky. So, another thing that you can all do, and we need to wrap this up, but, learn how to shoot, do jujitsu, grow your own food, become independent, question authority, pray to God, read your Bible. That's what you need to do.
There you go. I think that says it all. If you want to reach out, what's the number again? I don't have it up here. We'll get that on the next show here. What's the number that they can reach you at if they want to talk to you directly? Do you have a campaign number?
Call me. I got a campaign phone. It's right here. You can call me at 765-670-1221. I say again, 765-670-1221. You can email me, charles@bookwalterforcongress.com, or you could get it to our Facebook page, Bookwalter for Congress, or you can contact me on Twitter at TC Bookwalter, @TC Bookwalter. I thank you very much, those of you that have supported up to this point. And I ask those of you that doesn't matter where you live in your state, you know very well a congressman affects your life, whether they live in your state or not. And many of you live in the cities and you have a Democrat as a congressman and they're not going to be challenged. So you need to look at a candidacy like mine and support a candidacy like mine. I will guarantee you one thing. I will continue to speak truth to power. I am not afraid of them.
Yep. If you're in a city and you've got blue representation, the best way to get red representation is to vote for those people in the districts outside in the rural areas and let them go fight the fight for you. If your congressman won't do it, if your congressperson won't do it, then you got to do it. You've got to take control of your freedom. Charles, thank you so much. Glad we can do this again. Next Thursday night, 7 p.m. We'll start when we end. We don't know, but tonight about 2 hours, so another good show. We got a lot of great responses, by the way. Mary writes you a note here. Awesome show. Charles was awesome. So Mary, the producer, saying you're doing a great job.
Thank you, Mrs. Kramer says.
There we go. I appreciate it. With that being said, we're out here. We'll see you again next Thursday. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Our nation is at a breaking point. Out of control crime, runaway inflation, political corruption, and politicians who talk a big game but just can't seem to deliver. Charles Bookwalter is a proven conservative leader, a man of faith and conviction, a former Green Beret. Charles Bookwalter offered his life in the service of his nation once before and is now willing to serve again. To learn more about Charles Bookwalter and his vision for the state of Indiana and this great nation, visit bookwalterforcongress.com. That's bookwalterforcongress.com. Donate, volunteer, join in, stand up, and fight back.
I'm Charles Bookwalter, and I'm running to represent you in Indiana's 4th Congressional District. Why am I running? Simple. The out-of-control spending, well, it's out of control, and somebody has to do something about it.
Take, for example, this taxpayer-funded billboard that was strategically placed by Representative Baird in front of my Frankfort, Indiana, Jimmy John's franchise. Nice one, Jim. Now, to the untrained eye, this billboard looks exactly like a campaign ad, but it's not. It's franked mail. It's your tax dollars being used by an incumbent to remind you of all the reasons that you should go vote for them. And every day I leave work, I'm reminded exactly why I'm running for Congress. Jim Baird won't let me forget. Thanks, Jim.
I'm Charles Bookwalter, and I approve this message.
Our nation is at a breaking point. Out of control crime, runaway inflation, political corruption, and politicians who talk a big game but just can't seem to deliver. Charles Bookwalter is a proven conservative leader, a man of faith and conviction, a former Green Beret. Charles Bookwalter offered his life in the service of his nation once before and is now willing to serve again. To learn more about Charles Bookwalter and his vision for the state of Indiana and this great nation, visit bookwalterforcongress.com. That's bookwalterforcongress.com. Donate, volunteer, join in, stand up, and fight back.